Yo, yo, listen up, because what I'm about to walk you through right now is not just another hip-hop rumor floating in the wind. This is the buried body under the West Coast. This is the 10-year-old betrayal that just clawed its way out of the Compton dirt, and Kendrick Lamar is standing over the grave with the shovel. Straight up, the whisper going around the culture right now is that Kendrick Lamar has quietly, coldly, surgically cut the game out of his life forever, and the reason is so ugly, so personal, and so premeditated that even Top Dawg himself had to break protocol and pick up the phone to make sure the record got corrected in public. Kendrick Lamar does not move like this. Kendrick Lamar does not let anything leak. And yet, here we are, watching the whole industry try to piece together why the man who once stood on Compton stages with the game holding his hand up like a crown prince now acts like the game does not exist. Fam, this is not petty. This is not rap beef. This is a decade-buried assassination of a friendship, and Drake's fingerprints are all over the murder weapon. Peep this, because you already know how I do it. I'm going to walk you through every single receipt, every single lyric, every single Compton block that got desecrated on video, and by the time I'm done, you're going to understand exactly why Kendrick Lamar has spent 10 years plotting the quietest revenge in modern hip-hop history. But before I go one step further, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment with the name Kendrick Lamar so the algorithm knows what time it is, and stay to the end, because the last thing I'm about to tell you about that June 16th date is going to have you sitting there in silence. Watch time is everything. Completion percentage is everything. So lock in, because we are going in. Let me set the table real quick. To understand why Kendrick Lamar has iced the game out, you first have to understand the relationship Kendrick had with Drake, and then you have to understand the relationship the game had with Kendrick, and then you have to understand what happened when those two rivers crashed into each other in the middle of Compton in the summer of 2015. Because that is where the whole story lives. That is where the betrayal was born. Drake and Kendrick Lamar started off cool. Ain't nobody going to dispute that. There was the Club Paradise tour where Drake put Kendrick Lamar on the biggest stage of his young career at that point. There was Buried Alive interlude on Take Care, that whole moment where Kendrick Lamar sat in Drake's booth and painted a picture of hunger. There was Poetic Justice on Good Kid, M.A.D. City, one of the biggest crossover moments of Kendrick Lamar's early run. There were photos, tours, cosigns, love. Fast forward to when Kendrick Lamar wins MTV's Hottest MCs list, dethrones a room full of legends, and the whole culture gasps in real time. That was the moment the game started to shift. That was the moment Kendrick Lamar stopped being the kid on Drake's tour and started being the threat on Drake's throne. Then it started. A subtle little jab on 5 a.m. in Toronto. Drake goes, "I made the Forbes list, damn your list." Now, was that at Kendrick Lamar specifically? People argued about it for months. But looking back with the clarity of 2026 hindsight, we all know exactly who that bar was aimed at. Then came the control verse. Kendrick Lamar stepped inside a Big Sean record and murdered the entire generation on it. Called out Drake by name, called out J. Cole by name, called out everybody who thought they were in that top tier, and set the whole East Coast, West Coast, and Midwest on fire. Drake responded in interviews with that half-smile, half-shrug thing he does. Then he responded on Wax with lyrics on the language, and other cuts on Nothing Was the Same. And Kendrick Lamar? Kendrick Lamar went silent and started plotting. Because Kendrick Lamar does not respond right away. Kendrick Lamar cooks. Then came King Kunta. And here's where most of the audience missed the shot the first time it was fired. When Kendrick Lamar rapped, a rapper with a ghostwriter, what the hell happened? The entire industry heard it as a general shot. Nobody clocked it as a specific torpedo at Drake. That is because it was 2015. That is because the Meek Mill situation had not yet exploded. That is because Drake's ghostwriter conversation was still whispered in corners, not screamed from stadiums. But Kendrick Lamar knew. Kendrick Lamar always knew. He was already 3 moves ahead of everyone. That is Kendrick Lamar's entire career in one sentence. 3 moves ahead. Always. That is why, 10 years later, we are still uncovering layers of shots Kendrick Lamar took in 2015 that we did not even understand were shots at the time. That is a chess player. That is not a rapper. That is Kendrick Lamar. Now here comes the fuse. In that same summer of 2015, right when all this Drake and Kendrick Lamar tension is quietly cooking, the game drops a record called 100 featuring Drake. And on that record, Drake delivers a verse that includes the following lines. Listen carefully. I would have so many friends if I held back the truth, and I just gave out compliments. I would have all of your fans if I didn't go pop and I stayed on some conscious stuff. Now, real talk. When you hear that in 2015, in the exact climate we just walked through, who else could that possibly be aimed at? Who else in that lane at that time was labeled the conscious rapper? Who else was Drake in a Cold War with? Kendrick Lamar. Point blank. There is no other read. Here's what's wild though. That verse alone was already an act of quiet aggression. But then the game took the entire music video shoot and planted it right in the middle of Compton. Compton, Kendrick Lamar's home. Kendrick Lamar's block. Kendrick Lamar's neighborhood. The game is from Compton too, of course, so on paper it made sense. But the symbolism was undeniable. You took the guy who is at war with Kendrick Lamar, and you put him on your record, and you brought him into Kendrick Lamar's front yard to shoot a music video. If Kendrick Lamar is your brother, if Kendrick Lamar is family the way you keep telling the world he is family, then that is a violation of every unwritten rule in the culture. That is the moment the friendship snapped. That is the moment Kendrick Lamar closed the door on the game. That is what Top Dawg confirmed on the phone this week, and that is what has the entire West Coast in a chokehold right now. Reportedly. Let me put that word on it 3 times so we understand exactly what we are dealing with here. But when Top Dawg himself picks up the phone to call Stat Quo mid-podcast to make sure the correct version of events gets told on camera, that is not a rumor. That is a public correction. That is the president of TD stepping into the story to say, no, this is what happened. Do not let this narrative float wrong. Top Dawg does not do that for gossip. Top Dawg does that for the record. Now, moving on though, let's talk about the game and Kendrick Lamar's relationship, because you cannot understand the depth of the betrayal without understanding the depth of the love that existed before it. The game was one of Kendrick Lamar's earliest, loudest, most powerful cosigns on the West Coast. When Kendrick Lamar was still a kid on mixtapes, the game was the biggest rapper in Los Angeles. When TD was still an underground stable, the game brought Kendrick Lamar and Rock on his songs. He put them on tours. He put them in videos. He gave them the runway. He showed them how the industry moved. And that matters. That matters a lot. Because you don't forget the guy who opened doors when they were closed. You don't forget the guy who handed you the microphone when nobody knew your name. Kendrick Lamar has never been the type to forget where he came from. Kendrick Lamar buried a date-coded response to that Compton betrayal inside a diss record almost a decade later. That is the pettiness of a genius. That is the cold patience of a chess grandmaster. That is why Kendrick Lamar is Kendrick Lamar. He does not just remember. He weaponizes memory. He turns dates into daggers. And nobody in the culture caught it in real time. Nobody. Except Kendrick Lamar. And now us. Now that we are finally catching up to what he was doing, the entire 2024 Drake war looks different. Every single bar Kendrick Lamar dropped on Drake in that stretch was not just a shot at Drake. It was a shot at everybody who ever let Drake walk into a room Drake did not deserve to be in. Including, apparently, the game. Let's pause on that, because the room needs to breathe. Here's the thing. When we watched the 2024 Drake and Kendrick Lamar war unfold, most of us thought we were watching a 2-man conflict. 2 heavyweights, 2 catalogs, 2 ideologies. But what if what we were actually watching was Kendrick Lamar quietly settling a decade of Compton grudges all at once? What if 616 in LA was not just aimed at Drake, but was also a cold-blooded shot at the game for what happened on June 16, 2015? What if Kendrick Lamar was cleaning house, publicly and privately, and only now, in 2026, are we finally decoding the layers? That is Kendrick Lamar. That is exactly who he has always been. 3 moves ahead. Always. Now let me tell you what happened this week that lit the whole match. Justin Hunt and Stat Quo were live on the Third Verse podcast. Shout out to Justin Hunt. Shout out to the whole Third Verse crew, because that podcast is newer to the game, and they are already sitting in the middle of one of the biggest hip-hop stories of the year. Mid-podcast, right in the middle of a live stream, Top Dawg calls in. Top Dawg, the head of TD, the man closest to Kendrick Lamar in this entire industry. Now, they put the call on mute so the audience could not hear the conversation. But you could see Stat Quo's face. You could see the phone. You could see the reaction. And then Stat Quo came back and recapped exactly what Top Dawg had told him. And the recap was cold. The recap was this. Top Dawg told Stat Quo, listen, when these clips travel, when this story spreads, you have got to include the part about the 100 video. You cannot let the narrative float around as if Kendrick Lamar just stopped talking to the game for no reason. That video, Drake being in Compton, that lyric, that setup, that is what caused everything. That is what changed the relationship. That is the moment. Do not leave it out. And when Top Dawg makes a call like that, on camera, in real time, mid-podcast, that is TD putting their stamp on the record. That is not a rumor anymore. That is a corrected version straight from the top of the house. Now, matter of fact, let me be clear about something before somebody in the comments tries to be funny. We have not heard directly from Kendrick Lamar on this. Kendrick Lamar has not walked up to a microphone and said the words. But when Top Dawg is speaking with authority. Top Dawg is Kendrick Lamar's day one. Top Dawg helped raise the whole TD roster. If Top Dawg is confirming something on the record about Kendrick Lamar's state of mind, that carries a weight that only Kendrick Lamar's own mouth could top. And Kendrick Lamar does not use his mouth for stuff like this. Kendrick Lamar communicates through catalog. Kendrick Lamar communicates through silence. Kendrick Lamar communicates through 616 in LA. Now, Wack 100 has stepped into this conversation, because of course Wack 100 is going to step into anything involving the game. Wack is the game's manager. Wack is loud. Wack knows the story from the inside. Wack got on the phone with Adam22 on the No Jumper live stream and started clarifying the whole situation from the game's perspective. Let me walk you through what Wack said, because this is where the narrative starts to fork. Wack basically says this. Wack says, listen, in 2015, the game did not view the Drake and Kendrick Lamar situation as a real, serious, at-war beef. In 2015, it was viewed as a little rap tension, a little back and forth on records, some subliminals. Nothing that ever escalated to a level where anybody thought a friendship was going to break. Wack says the game considered both Drake and Kendrick Lamar as people. Wack says if Kendrick Lamar had picked up the phone in 2015 and said, hey game, I don't want Drake on this record with a subliminal aimed at me, the game would have handled it. The game would have called Drake. The game would have called Wack. Something would have gotten fixed. Because in the game's mind, both of these dudes were his little brothers. Because the game had crowned Kendrick Lamar in Compton with his own hands. Because the game had known Drake for years. Because the game came from Compton and Drake, and the game had a long-standing relationship. So from the game's angle, if there was a real problem, the game would have moved on it. But the game did not think there was a real problem. So the game did not move. And that, right there, is the whole tragedy. That is Kendrick Lamar and the game standing on two different sides of the same misunderstanding. Because Kendrick Lamar was not looking at it as a small rap situation. Kendrick Lamar was looking at it as a betrayal of loyalty. Kendrick Lamar was looking at it as, if you are my brother, you do not let this guy get on your record and throw a shot at me. If you are my brother, you do not shoot the video in my hood. If you are my brother, you protect the block from this energy. Kendrick Lamar and TD move a very specific way. They are disciplined. They are quiet. They are self-contained. They do not air stuff out to the press. They do not go running to podcasts. They do not have press conferences. They close the door and they lock it. And that is exactly what happened to the game. Kendrick Lamar closed the door and locked it, and the game did not even know the door had shut for a while, because Kendrick Lamar does not announce his exits. Kendrick Lamar just disappears from the frame. Straight up, this is the difference in cultural code between Kendrick Lamar and the game. The game comes from a world where a problem is a problem when guns come out or fists fly. If nobody got shot and nobody got knocked out, in the game's calculus, it is not really a problem. It is rap stuff. It is entertainment. Kendrick Lamar comes from a completely different code. Kendrick Lamar's code is spiritual. Kendrick Lamar's code is loyalty. Kendrick Lamar's code is, your energy tells me who you are, and once I see it forever. Kendrick Lamar does not need a fight to know somebody violated him. Kendrick Lamar just needs a video shot on the wrong block with the wrong guy saying the wrong bar. That is enough. That is all Kendrick Lamar needs to file a 10-year quiet vendetta. Circling back, let me remind you of something Wack said that I want you to hold on to. Wack said Drake actually bounced from the 100 video set at one point because he perceived some tension in the neighborhood, some commotion, some vibes, and Drake left. Then the game's team had to physically go get Drake and bring him back to finish shooting the video. Now, Wack framed that as, look, Drake did what he was supposed to do. He saw danger. He exited. We as Compton stood on protocol and made sure he was safe and could come back to finish his work. Cool. That is one read. But peep this. From Kendrick Lamar's angle, that also means Drake's inner circle knew Compton was live enough that Drake felt the need to leave. It means Drake was uncomfortable enough in Kendrick Lamar's home turf that Drake had to physically remove himself. And still, they came back, brought him back, and finished shooting the video with a subliminal aimed at Kendrick Lamar. From Kendrick Lamar's angle, that is a level of disrespect that lives in a different room than the one Wack is describing. Real talk. This is why Kendrick Lamar and TD close the circle when things get funny. Because they are not built to argue about it. They are not built to explain themselves. They are not built to have a podcast conversation about who violated who. They watch, they clock it, they file it, and they wait. And 10 years later, they release 616 in LA. That is TD. That is Kendrick Lamar. That is Top Dawg's discipline running through the whole roster. Now, listen, the game has been out here competitive for a long time. Let's not pretend otherwise. Earlier this year, the game dropped a record called Whatever. And on that record he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if I ain't the best rapper from Compton, it has to be Kendrick. And if Kendrick is the best rapper, tell him step up and end it. And he said he was in the stands clapping hands for the man he befriended. And he said he can't go to war against the guy he gave his appendix. Now, that is a bar. That is the game putting his hand up and saying, if Kendrick Lamar wants the smoke is available. And I hear that from the game. The game has been that guy his whole career. The game has taken shots at Jay-Z. The game has jabbed at Eminem. The game has had years of back and forth with 50 Cent. The game is a competitor at his core. The game is not scared to mix it up. The game views a hip-hop back and forth as good for business. And honestly, he is not wrong. When Kendrick Lamar and Drake were in the ring, the whole culture pulled up. Streams went crazy. Numbers went crazy. Everybody ate. So the game is looking at a potential dust-up with Kendrick Lamar and thinking, this could be another moment for the West. But here's the thing. Kendrick Lamar is not going to give him that moment. Because Kendrick Lamar does not give people what they want. Kendrick Lamar gives people what they earned. And in Kendrick Lamar's ledger, the game has not earned a response verse. The game has earned silence. And silence, from Kendrick Lamar, is worse than any diss record you could ever write. Because silence tells the whole industry that you are not on the ledger anymore. You are not on the enemies list. You are not on the friends list. You are not on any list. You have been deleted. That is the Kendrick Lamar treatment. Can't nobody tell me this is a small thing either. Because Stat Quo, one of the most respected voices in this current commentary landscape, went on Culture United, went on Third Verse, and laid it all out. Stat Quo confirmed that when he told the game and Wack about the 100 video being at the center of this, they knew. They already knew. This was already communicated to them years ago. Top Dawg had already relayed it to the game's camp. So it is not like this is new information. It is not like Kendrick Lamar and TD were sitting on a secret grievance. They told the game. They told Wack. They told the whole side of that camp. And now that Stat Quo is repeating it in public, Top Dawg is making sure the public account matches the private account that was already delivered years ago. That is TD keeping the record straight. That is TD not letting the story soften over time. Now, sit with this for a second, because I want you to feel the weight of it. Kendrick Lamar has been carrying this for 10 years. 10 years. Think about what Kendrick Lamar has accomplished in those 10 years while quietly holding this grudge. To Pimp a Butterfly. Damn. The Pulitzer Prize for Music, the first non-jazz, non-classical artist ever to win it. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. GNX. The Super Bowl halftime performance in New Orleans where he stood in the middle of the world's biggest stage and dismantled Drake in front of 133 million viewers. Every single one of those milestones happened while Kendrick Lamar was holding the grudge from June 16, 2015. That is discipline. That is patience. That is the quietest, coldest form of revenge in the entire history of hip-hop. Because Kendrick Lamar did not need the game to fall to prove a point. Kendrick Lamar just needed to keep rising while the game watched from the sideline. And that is exactly what Kendrick Lamar has done. Now, the culture is asking, is the game going to try to respond? Is the game going to drop a record aimed at Kendrick Lamar? Is Wack going to escalate this on the live streams? Personally, I do not think we are going to see Kendrick Lamar dignify anything with a verse. Kendrick Lamar has already said everything he wanted to say. 616 in LA said it. Not like us said it. Meet the Grahams said it. Every single bar of the 2024 Drake or said it. The game is not on Kendrick Lamar's level right now, commercially or culturally, and Kendrick Lamar knows it. Kendrick Lamar is not going to punch down. Kendrick Lamar is going to keep pretending the game does not exist. And that is going to eat at the game more than any diss record could. Now, on the other side, the game might try to force a moment. The game might drop something calculated to bait a response. The game might make it a whole news cycle. And if the game does that, look, we will cover it. We will break it down. We will pull up the receipts. But it will not work. Because Kendrick Lamar has already decided. Kendrick Lamar decided on June 16, 2015, when he watched that 100 music video roll into his neighborhood with Drake in the passenger seat. Kendrick Lamar decided that day. Everything since then has just been execution. Let me tell you something else that has been sitting with me. There is a beautiful, painful irony in all of this, and I want to make sure I say it out loud. The game genuinely believed he was big brother to the whole Compton generation. The game genuinely believed he had put Kendrick Lamar on. The game genuinely believed the relationship was so foundational that a little rap subliminal on a record could never break it. And in a fair world, in a soft world, the game would be right. But hip-hop is not fair, and Kendrick Lamar's world is not soft. Kendrick Lamar's world is precise. Kendrick Lamar's world is coded. And in Kendrick Lamar's world, once a line is crossed, it does not uncross. That is the tragedy of a friendship built on unspoken rules. When one man thinks the rules are flexible and the other man thinks the rules are law, somebody is going to get exiled. And in this story, the exile is the game. Some people are going to say, look, they are grown men, They can patch this up anytime. Anything is possible. But look at Kendrick Lamar's track record. When has Kendrick Lamar ever publicly walked back in exile? The pattern says once Kendrick Lamar closes the door, that door stays closed. So unless the game speaks Kendrick Lamar's language of loyalty in a way that is undeniable, this is the ending. The game on the outside, Kendrick Lamar at a distance, and a whole city of Compton fans caught between two of their kings. Here's what twists the knife. Imagine being the game right now, watching Kendrick Lamar dominate the culture, stand on the Super Bowl stage, collect Pulitzers and stream records, and knowing Kendrick Lamar has ice-cold decided you are not a part of any of it. Every time Kendrick Lamar looks at Compton, he sees the block the game, let Drake film a subliminal in. That is not a wound that heals with a phone call. That becomes part of Kendrick Lamar's mythology. And that mythology is now global. Real talk. I have watched fallouts, seen crews split, seen brothers become strangers. But there is something about this one that hits different, because Kendrick Lamar handles it with the kind of silence that only comes from someone who has fully processed the pain and made peace with it. Kendrick Lamar is not angry. Kendrick Lamar is not sad. Kendrick Lamar is done. And that is the coldest place a person can arrive at. Not rage. Done. Once Kendrick Lamar is done with you, you are archived. You are a chapter that ended. You are a name that Kendrick Lamar will never say in public again unless it is inside a bar so surgical that it changes your life. Ask Drake. Drake knows. Drake has been living inside a Kendrick Lamar bar for 2 years now. Every award show, every stream chart, every meme, every recap video, Drake is being defined by what Kendrick Lamar said about him. That is the power of a Kendrick Lamar sentence. That is the gravity of Kendrick Lamar's silence. Straight up, if the game is smart, and the game is smart, the game will not escalate. The game will not respond. The game will let this news cycle pass. We'll let the podcasts move on. We'll let Wack calm down on the live streams, and we'll focus on his own catalog. Because engaging with Kendrick Lamar right now is a losing proposition for everybody who is not Kendrick Lamar. Drake tried it. Look how that went. Nobody has publicly recovered from a Kendrick Lamar record in 2 years. Nobody. That is the current climate. That is the terrain. The game does not want to walk into that same forest. Now, before I wrap this up, let me remind you of one more thing that got glossed over. The game has been publicly loving on Kendrick Lamar for years. On records. In interviews. In social media posts. The game has consistently said Kendrick Lamar is the best rapper alive. The game has consistently placed himself as Kendrick Lamar's cheerleader. And I actually believe the game means every word of that. I think the game genuinely admires Kendrick Lamar. I think the game genuinely loves what Kendrick Lamar has built. So this is not a case of a hater. This is not a case of a jealous ex-friend. This is a case of a man who genuinely thought he was still in the fraternity finding out, 10 years later, that he has been quietly removed from the roster. And that is a specific kind of heartbreak. That is a specific kind of pain. That is the pain of being frozen out by somebody you never stopped loving. Sit with this for a second, because this is the layer nobody is talking about. The game might be the only person in this entire saga who is still emotionally invested in the friendship. Kendrick Lamar has clearly moved on. Top Dawg has clearly closed the file. TD has clearly redrawn its map. But the game? The game is out here on interviews, on records, on live streams, still saying Kendrick Lamar's name with reverence. That imbalance is going to hurt. That imbalance is going to eat at the game the longer this goes. Because when you are the only person still standing in a room the other person walked out of years ago, you eventually have to admit the room is empty. That is where the game is right now. Standing in an empty room with Kendrick Lamar's exit still echoing. Now, let me bring in one more piece of the puzzle before I close, because you need the full picture. This whole conversation about the 100 music video did not become a mainstream story until Stat Quo went on the Third Verse podcast and dropped it. And then Culture United amplified it. And then academics jumped on the phone with Wack. And now it is a full culture-wide discussion. But here is the wild part. The information was always there. The 100 music video came out on June 16, 2015. Anybody with a keyboard could have looked it up years ago. The Compton setting was public. The Drake verse was public. Kendrick Lamar's discomfort was, in hindsight, visible in the silence he kept after that record. But the culture did not connect the dots until this week. And that is what fascinates me about hip-hop. The receipts are always available. The story is always right there in the calendar. It just takes the right conversation to unlock what everybody was looking at without seeing. That is what Kendrick Lamar does. Kendrick Lamar rewards the audience for going back and looking at the tape. Kendrick Lamar's catalog is a museum you can revisit for the rest of your life. And every time you revisit it with new information, the exhibits change. Now that we know Kendrick Lamar has been quietly seething about the 100 video since 2015, every Compton reference in his catalog since then reads different. Every mention of loyalty reads different. Every subtle jab at rappers who forget where they come from reads different. Kendrick Lamar has been telling us this story in fragments for a decade, and we are only now reading it in order. Fam, I want to leave you with a couple of things to sit with before you head to the comments. First, ask yourself this. If the game had shot the 100 music video anywhere else in Los Angeles, if the game had picked a neutral block, if the game had told Drake, listen bro, no subliminals at my brother on this record, we all clear on that. Do we even have this story? Do we still have this exile? Do we still have 616 in LA? I do not think we do. I think the entire arc of the Kendrick Lamar and Drake war might have played out differently, or might have taken longer to erupt, or might not have erupted at all. Because that 100 video was not just a music video. That 100 video was the crack in the foundation. That 100 video was the moment Kendrick Lamar decided the West Coast alliance he had been part of was, in his private ledger, over. And once Kendrick Lamar decides something is over, it is over. Second thing, ask yourself this. Who else has Kendrick Lamar quietly cut out that we have not connected the dots on yet? Because if the game got exiled over a music video shoot in 2015, and we did not figure it out until 2026, who else is on that list? Whose name have we been missing from Kendrick Lamar's catalog and not noticed the absence? That is a question that is going to keep me up at night. That is a question that is going to have hip-hop podcasters doing deep dives for months. And that is exactly the kind of question Kendrick Lamar wants us asking. Because Kendrick Lamar's whole game is layered. Kendrick Lamar's whole game is subtext. Kendrick Lamar's whole game is trusting that eventually, the culture will catch up to what he already knew. Third thing, ask yourself this. Do you actually blame Kendrick Lamar? Because I want you to be honest. If you had built a career from the bottom of Compton, if you had turned yourself into the most respected voice in modern hip-hop, if you had watched your rival get pulled into your own neighborhood by somebody you called your brother, would you have forgiven it? Would you have let it slide? Would you have picked up the phone and said, hey game, you violated, but let's talk? Or would you have done exactly what Kendrick Lamar did, closed the door, locked it, and let the door stay locked for a decade? Drop your take in the comments, and let's argue it out. I want the West Coast in the comments. I want the East Coast in the comments. I want the down south in the comments. I want everybody in the comments. Because this story is not over. Kendrick Lamar is not done. Something else is coming. I feel it. You feel it. The whole culture feels it. Before I close, one more note for the day ones. Watch the calendar. Because if there is one thing this whole 100 saga has taught us, it is that Kendrick Lamar uses dates as weapons. 616 was not random. Kendrick Lamar plants seeds. Kendrick Lamar counts anniversaries. Kendrick Lamar knows the calendar the way most rappers know their own discography. So do not be surprised if, somewhere in the next 12 months, Kendrick Lamar drops something that lands on a date that means something specific to this exact story. Do not be surprised if there is another cryptic release that ties back to the Compton block, to the 100 video, to the summer of 2015. Because Kendrick Lamar does not forget. Kendrick Lamar files. And when the file gets opened, the whole city shakes. Listen, I could sit here and keep spinning theories all day. I could keep pulling threads. But the truth is, the biggest story in hip-hop right now is not a beef. It is a betrayal. And it is not new. It is a decade-old wound that finally cracked open under the studio lights this week, because Top Dawg himself picked up the phone and made sure the record was corrected. That is the story. The game brought Drake to Compton. Drake dropped a subliminal at Kendrick Lamar on Compton Wax. Kendrick Lamar filed it. Kendrick Lamar waited. Kendrick Lamar released 616 in LA on the anniversary date, whether or not anybody in the public caught it in real time. And now, in 2026, we are all watching the pieces click into place. If you rocked with this breakdown, hit that like button. If you have not subscribed, subscribe right now, because when the next domino falls, and it is going to fall, I am going to be first in the comments section breaking it down for you. Share this video with somebody who thinks they know the Kendrick Lamar and Drake story, because after watching this, they realize they did not know half of it. And most importantly, watch time is everything. Completion percentage is everything. So if you made it this far, thank you. You are the reason this channel exists. You are the reason we can keep telling these stories. I appreciate you. Now click over to the next video I have queued up, because I already broke down the 616 in LA lyrics line by line. And once you match what I just told you today with what those lyrics actually say, the whole picture is going to lock in. Kendrick Lamar has been playing chess. The game was playing checkers. And Drake was just a piece on the board. Until next time, take care of yourselves, protect your circle, and remember, in hip-hop, silence is louder than any diss record ever recorded. Kendrick Lamar knows that better than anybody alive. Peace.